Hello, my name is Christine O'Connor. I'll be reading an essay from Atlantic Currents called Road Trips, Where Strange Things Pass. Part of that title comes from a line in a poem by Seamus Heaney called Postscript. And the essay attempts to explore the effect that poets can have on us as readers, and how a poem can move from the textual to the actual, to the everyday. Road trips, where strange things pass. On a hot July day, away from the crowds and stickiness of O'Connell Street, I tucked into the old Bank of Ireland building for a Seamus Heaney exhibit called Listen Now Again. I had just flown in from the States and was at the start of my vacation. That evening, I was going to a 70th birthday party, and the next day, myself and two cousins, Marie and David, one Irish, one American, were leaving Dublin for an extended road trip in Scotland. Inside was Heaney's desk, plain and simple, and under glass, the many written pages of his poems. I saw his sometimes hurried handwriting, the strikeouts and arrows redirecting readers from misplaced words. Sitting on a shelf was a lamp once owned by Yeats and later purchased by Heaney. What writing its light must have reached. On a chalkboard were the last words he ever wrote. It was a message to his wife, although I like to think it was meant for a wider audience. Translated from the Latin, it means, "Don't be afraid." And here and there were reminders that the words he used to describe the struggles of his day remain relevant to our own. But it was his poem, Postscript, reprinted on the wall of the exhibit, where I lingered most, reading it over several times, listening to it again and again. And sometime, make time to drive out west, it begins. The poem was written after a drive the Heaneys took along the flaggy shore of Clare with the playwright Brian Friel and his wife. It came to him a few days later, and although working on another project, he stopped and gave into it. After completing it, he sent the poem to the Irish Times. Included in the exhibit was Heaney's own cutout copy of its printing, along with the marginal edits he wished he had made. Regardless of his desire to tinker further, it would become regarded as one of his most loved poems. In recent years, this poem tugged at me with a deep sense of familiarity. Perhaps it reminded me of my own flaggy shore, not in the west, but in the north, the rocky coast of Maine, and of my aunts, Eileen, Edna, and Mary, and the many times we too took a ride to the shore in the off-season, bundled up in sweaters, hands deep in pockets. We'd walk from one rocky outcrop to the next, leaning red-faced into a stiff Atlantic wind. In the exhibit, as people passed, I stood, repeatedly reading the poem until I ached with a dull sadness. "Are we set yet, Chris?" said my cousin Marie. "Yes," I said. "Just another minute."